In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can leverage Langchain, OpenAI function calling, WebSockets in your Next.js application to build an application that takes in a natural language prompt like this. So if I say, what is Apple stock doing? What this is doing, my front end is listening for the WebSocket events, and there's 3 different events. So there's one for the ticker, there's one for the stock chart itself, and then there's one for the natural language query. So obviously you could scale this up from just 3 to be a whole dashboard if you'd like. You could have all sorts of financial information you could imagine in this type of example, or just have it render out a view. So you could imagine you have an application and you want to incorporate natural language. Imagine being able to have a user input what they want to see within the application, and then it just renders it out. So I thought this would be an interesting area to explore. There's a lot of natural language in, natural language out examples out there. So I thought I'd dive into an alternative approach with some cool tech that you can leverage to incorporate into your application. So the first thing that I'm going to have you do is we're going to have to set up a handful of API keys within our project. So you can simply do a create next app, and then I'll run through all the steps here. Also, shortly after the video is posted, I'll make sure to include a GitHub repo if you want to use this as a starting off point. So one thing to note, I'm going to be showing you basically all the services are free with the exception of the OpenAI API. Now, with that said, this example is using the GPT 3.5 model, so it is still relatively cheap. So the first thing you can do is you can make an account on pusher.com. This is going to be what we use as the service to distribute our different WebSocket events. So you can set up an account for free. Then what you're going to need is you're going to create a channel. Once you've created a channel, you'll have a dashboard view like this, and you can simply go into your app keys. So once you have your app keys available, you can go within the .env.local.example. In this, how it's going to ultimately be outputted, we're just going to have our .env.local, but I'm just showing you this for example's sake. And what you're going to do is you're going to put all your different values within the variables here. So next from there, I'm not going to show you how to get these because they're incredibly simple. Just go over to the OpenAI API page, and then you can get an API key. And then similarly on AlphaVantage, super simple. You don't even need to log in to get an API key if you're using their free tier. Now, one thing with AlphaVantage, they give you 5 requests per minute with 100 requests per day. So you'll be able to try this out if you want to test it out with this example. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the back end, and then I'll go through the front end. One thing to note, I just have 2 files that we're going to be working out of after our .env. It's going to be our route and our page, and that's it. So it's not a whole lot of code to be able to accomplish this. And yeah, we'll just get going here. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to install a handful of packages. So I have the packages that we're going to install in the back end and the front end within the files here. So in this example, I'm using pnpm. So you can pnpm.env, Langchain, Pusher, and Zod. Now with Langchain, once you install it, I believe .env and Zod are dependencies of the project. So you might not need to install them, but I just included them here just in case. So we're going to include a handful of modules here. Now, as I go through the code, I'll dive into the description of what these are doing as we go through them. So first, we're going to load in our environment variables from our .env that we just set up. Then we're going to establish the model that we're going to be using. So this defaults to GPT 3.5, but you could specify GPT-4 if you'd like. Then here is where we're going to be reaching in for all our different pusher variables. And then here is going to be our post request route. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to destructure the message that we receive from the front end, and that's the only input that we're going to be accepting in the back end here. Then once we have the message, what we're going to do is we're going to declare a new dynamic structure tool. So this is a tool within Langchain, and it's set up in a way where you can use it for tools for agents, but it's also set up in a way where you can use the what you set up here for OpenAI function calling. So there's a handful of things here to dissect. Now this fetch historical data is what we're going to be using to get the chart here. So you need a description that the natural language LLM maps to what you want to have it do. So here I have it trigger stock data based on their ticker. And then I have this schema where I specify I want an argument of a ticker, which is a string. So the z.object and z.string is Zod. So that's what we're going to be using for our schema validation. So once we have that, we're going to write our traditional function within the method here. So here we're going to be specifying our AlphaVantage API key, and this is the route to interact with that time series. So we get an array of all those different data points of the date and the value. And then we're just going to do a simple fetch request, and then we're going to parse that. And then from here, we're going to just map through it. And this is going to be what we send back to through our pusher channel to our front end. So our front end is going to be listening for chart and ticker, as well as the message here. And then I'm also going to be returning a response for our Langchain agent, which I'll show you in just a moment here, with the value of the last value within that array. So the most recent value. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is this is going to be where we're going to establish the tools for our agent. So as you see here, I have one function declared for our tools array here, but you could just copy this and paste a number of different functions if you'd like, and you can have it all broken up. So say if there's different queries and you want them isolated like that, you can have a whole bunch of different functions that are passed into the OpenAI API. And then here we're just initializing our agent, we're passing in our tools, we're passing in the model that we set up, and then we're specifying that this is an OpenAI Functions agent. So here we're simply running the agent with our message. And then finally, once this has finished, we're going to return the result. So you see this message is the last thing that gets rendered. It's getting the ticker first once it's parsed. So these two will render pretty quickly, one after another, but it's going to go in that order as you see the different pusher triggers that have run through here. So next we're going to go over to the front end, and similar to the back end, I have the packages that you need to require right at the top here. So PNPMI, Pusher, Chart.js, and React Chart.js 2. So we're going to specify that we're using client on this since it is a client-side component. We're going to require some of the standard React things that we need, use effect and use state and whatnot. We're going to import Pusher. Here we're going to import a handful of things for our chart. We're going to register them. We're going to import the line chart. So one thing to note if you haven't used Chart.js is it's not just line charts. There's a whole bunch of different charts, I should say. So say if you want to have a dashboard view and you have pie charts or line charts and all sorts of things, you can leverage this library for a whole bunch of different chart styles. So here we're going to be establishing and defining our app component. And then from here, we're just going to be declaring a number of hooks. So we have one for our chart data. We have one for our input value of our input here. We have our message. We have our ticker. And then we also have loading states for each of these three. So from there, we're going to be handling the input change here. So as this changes, we're going to be setting our value of the hook here. We're also going to be handling our key press. So we're going to be listening for the enter key. So it works on submit and on enter. Now within our use effect, we have a fair bit here. So this is going to be where we actually set up our new pusher instance, and we're going to be referencing to our implementation of the channel that we have set up. Then from here, we're going to do a channel.bind. So this is where we're going to be listening for that chart event. So if I go back to the route here and I go to the bottom of our function here, you see that we have our channel name and then we have the value that it's listening for. So that's going to listen for whenever that chart is sent across. We're going to log out that data and then we're going to set the state of our chart data. And the main thing that comes through the channel is what's within the data here, but there's also some things that are just set up for the standard configuration of the chart. And then finally, once that's set, we're going to just change the loading state to false. So similarly for the message, we're just going to do essentially the same thing. It's a lot simpler because we just have the string as a message, and then we're going to change the loading state. And then similar thing for the ticker as well. And then finally, we'll just do a little bit of cleanup for our WebSockets at the end here. So once we have that, we're going to change the states of a handful of things and set the value of our message and all the other values of our different hooks that we've declared, and just reset them every time that someone clicks enter, essentially, is the way that you can think about these. So then we're going to have a try catch, and this is going to be where we actually send our fetch request to our backend. So it's within the route of API/chat. So we're doing a post request, we're stringifying the message. So we just have the one key we're sending across, and then it's just going to simply let us know if it's sent correctly or not. And then finally, we're just going to go through our JSX. So we're going to have a couple wrappers. So we're using Tailwind in this example. And it's just like you see visually. So the top to the bottom, so it's going to be the ticker at the top here. It's going to see whether it's loading. If it's loading, we have that loading state. And then if it's loaded, we have the ticker itself. For the chart, same thing. Loading state. If it's rendered, it'll render. Messages, same thing. And then finally, we just have our input. So as you see, it's pretty straightforward to set something like this up. I thought I'd share an example because I think this is a different area within sort of the AI boom and being able to build apps with LLMs that is a little bit less focused on, but nonetheless very neat. So this is something that I just came up with relatively quickly, but you could imagine like the different applications for this, right? So say you have an application and you want to throw in a text box where users maybe set their settings. So you can imagine you have different sliders or what have you, and based on a natural language prompt, just set their settings, or there's a multitude of examples or things you could try with this. So I just thought I'd give you a little bit of a starting off point if you're working or looking to work within this tech stack. But that's pretty much it for this one. So if you found this video useful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I also set up a Patreon recently after a couple individuals requested one, which was very nice of them. So if you're interested in becoming a Patreon subscriber, I'll also put a link in the description. But otherwise, until the next one.